Are you tasked with collecting logs from thousands of Windows systems? Curious how to get that to your SIM without having to deploy yet another agent? This video is for you. So in this video, what I'm trying to show is how to get logs from numerous Windows assets using Windows Event Forwarding to a Windows Event Collector. And then from there, you can drop an agent on that, send it off to your SIM, multiple SIMs, and really the focus is let's go through Windows Event Collection. Now, in my environment, I've got multiple virtual machines. I technically already have a production Windows Event Collector, but my goal in this video is to show you from start to finish how to set this up. Couple things that already exist that are kind of prerequisites. Technically, you don't have to have this. You can do Windows Event Collection even on non-domain join assets, but it's much harder, more difficult, and that's not the scope of this conversation. So what you do need to have for this is a member server somewhere that will act as your Windows Event Collector. It's where all your logs are going to get forwarded to, and it needs to be joined to an Active Directory domain. So in my case, I have a WEC demo server. I'm going to use that to stand it up as a new Windows Event Collector. And then I can send all of my machines or maybe certain machines through a subscription to that server. I'm going to simulate this with Windows 10 WEC test, which is a Windows 10 box. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the Windows Collector. I'm going to start there. So this WEC demo, it's joined to the domain. I'm just going to RDB to it. WEC demo. Here we go. I'm going to log into it. And I need to set this up as a Windows Event Collector. So the first step is I'm going to make a few changes on this box. There we go. So servers here. Ignore the services that didn't start. That's nothing to do with this. And you'll notice if I right click here or do Windows X and go to Event Viewer, in here, when this pops up, if I click on subscriptions, it says, hey, you have to start the Windows Event Collector service. I'm going to hit no for just a second just to show you something. And if I expand Windows logs and click on forwarded events, which is where all the logs coming in will end up, if I go to properties on this, it's kind of interesting. It's not enabled and I can't change some of the settings because it's not yet a collector. All right, let's go back to subscriptions. And I'm going to say yes. At that point, forwarded events can now be altered. And that initial log size is dismal. So we want to make that much larger. Usually I set it to about 4 gig, but just increase this by something. Get it quite a bit larger. For this, I don't really need to. It's a smaller lab. But there's a few things I'm going to do too. I'm going to open first PowerShell as an administrator. So right click, run as administrator here. And I'm going to run a few commands. One, I'm going to get Windows Remote Management set up. There it is. It was already turned on because either of my existing policies or because I started the service. I'm going to make sure it's set to automatic. I technically have a group policy in place that already would have done that in my environment, but again, this is what you would want to do. And I'm going to change some of the Windows Event Collection settings here using this command, this web-util command. And I will post this under the video so you have it. That will let me adjust some of the settings for tuning. You can find more on a whole bunch of in-the-weeds settings by just Googling best practices Windows Event Collector or Windows Event Forwarding. And there's a really nice Microsoft article on it. It'll explain those in further detail. There's also something that's kind of interesting. I'm using Server 2019. And so if I were to just go through finishing up and getting logs forwarded into this collector, it wouldn't work. Because in Server 2016 and 2019, they actually changed some of the access controls on how we're doing Windows Remote Management. So again, I'll put this in the notes below the video, but I need to run some commands here. These are netsh commands because what I'm doing, oh, sorry, I need to do this There's a syntax issue with me running this in PowerShell. So I need to run this in a command prompt with admin. There we go. Notice this time we've got them successfully being added. All this is doing is making sure that machines, workstations, servers can connect to Windows Remote Management for forwarding logs. So at this point, I'm ready to create a subscription. So under subscriptions, I'm going to right click and I'm going to say create subscription. I'm just going to call this test. And I can do collector initiated, which means this server then would reach over and pull logs. I really don't like doing that, and I never do. It doesn't scale as well, and really what I want is source computer initiated. I want machines to push logs to me. Now, for this is basically where I'm going to say what machines are authorized to forward logs into this box. I've got a test system in here. Let me move this over. I'm RDP'd, double RDP'd here. There we go. Maximize that. There we go. The machine I'm using is called Win10 WEC test. So Win10 WEC test. I've now authorized that box to push logs into this. Normally you would do something like domain computers if you wanted all. If you have more than, say, 4,000 assets at your company, though, you kind of want to divide them up into 4,000 machines per Windows Event Collector or less. I'll talk about an advanced application on how you could do that automatically towards the end of this video. For now, let's just get this up and running, and I'll show you some more advanced things at the end. Okay, hit OK. And before I turn this loose, I need to figure out what events I want to collect. So I'm going to do select. You're never going to use this filter tab. You really want to go to XML, edit query manually, yes, and we want to put some type of XPath filter here. Now, the good news is I do have this a little simplified. If you go to sec555.com/wec, this redirects to a GitHub I have that kind of has a starting config. So grab the security channel, but suppress some of these noisy events. Get application, system, sysmon, PowerShell, PowerShell again, because those are different channels, WMI, task goods, and this is a really good starting framework, Windows Defender. I'll grab this, and I'm going to go back into my RDP, paste that. I did notice for whatever reason when you copy it, it adds this to the bottom. Make sure you get rid of that and hit OK. Before I hit OK now, I'm going to make one more change. I'm going to go into advanced. And I personally like to set mine up for minimized latency, which means it sends me the data quicker, much quicker. Otherwise, you'll be sitting there like, why is the log not arriving? So I tend to set mine to minimize latency. And for those of you who are looking at protocol and be like, oh my gosh, it's not encrypted traffic, HTTP. That's not exactly true. This is HTTP by default, but the data that comes across is actually authenticated and encrypted. So this tends to be a fairly good default, a good secure default. You can technically add an extra layer by flipping this to HTTPS, but you'll have to make a few adjustments to the group policies, and you'll have to make sure that the Windows Remote Management is listening for HTTPS connections, which are similar to those netsh commands we ran a second ago. All right, I'm just going to hit OK. Hit OK. My server is now set up. It's ready to receive connections, but if I hit F5 here, there's no source computers checking in. It's because I haven't told them to. I haven't pushed out a policy. So here I'm going to minimize out of my Windows Event Collector that I've stood up, and I'm going to open up group policy. Let's make sure I've got this in here. I am on my jump box. Yep. I want to make sure I'm opening the right one. There we go. I might not have installed group policy on this one. Okay, that's fine. I did not. That's not a big deal. I'm just going to RDP into one of my domain controllers. And so here's where we're going to set the settings on what to point to. So get this logged in. And I'm going to create a group policy. I can link it at the top of the domain, which applies to all machines, or I could apply it to a certain OUs. I can technically edit the permission of the group policy itself and make it only apply to certain machines. You pick. What I typically do is push it at the top. Let this load up. Here we go. Give this just a second. I'll just do two layer. And group policy. There we go. Now I technically already have a production Windows event collector. So if I expand my domain and look at this, I have a policy called Windows Event Forwarding. And if I look at settings, it's already pre-set up to get my other Windows Event Collector going. Here we go. So we see down here, you're adding the network service to the event log readers because the Windows Event Forwarding that's inside of Windows will run as the network service account. I'm changing the Windows Remote Management Service to auto start. That way, if a machine restarts, I need that to be running. And then I'm telling it to limit the amount of logs that can be forwarded to no more than 1,000 a second. In production, you might actually want to lower that for things like workstations or member servers. If it's too high, you might flood your Windows event collectors and they can crash. If it's too low, then your system might be generating more logs than it can send. Domain controllers are a good example of that. I've seen where environments set this too low, like 100, but they have domain controllers serving lots of assets. So it's generating more than 100 a second. You limit to 100, you're never going to get all the logs. So be careful with that. But if you don't set it, it'll send as fast as it can. And then the key is pointing it at your Windows event collector. Now mine's called WEC demo. So this is my production one. That's not what I'm going to use here in a second. And then the last thing is we need to change the access control. And this one on screen is actually wrong. I'll show you what it is, what the correct one is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to temporarily just disable my policy because I'm recording this for you. And I'm going to create my WEC demo. Windows Event Forwarding, I'll call it WEC demo. Okay, and we're just going to kind of manually set these up so you can see where they go. Make sure I'm on the right policy. There we go, edit. And here what I'm going to do is I'm going to go under policies, Windows, security settings, and I'm modifying first restricted groups. I'm adding in here, and what we're doing is the event log readers group. Here it is, event log readers. And I want to add NT authority network service. Add, okay. And it should look just like this. Okay, so that's the first one. That's needed so that the Windows event forwarding can read the logs because it's part of the event log reader group. From there, I'm going to go under System Services. Let's see if I can find System Services here. And I'm going to find the Windows Remote Management. And I'm going to define it and set it to automatic and hit OK. Again, computer restarts. I want to make sure the Windows Remote Management service is started. Otherwise, I'm not going to receive logs. Now, the core of this then is going under this administrative template and pointing it at the Windows Event Collector. So it's under Windows Components, Event Forwarding. There we go. And I'm going to do Configure Forwarder Resource Usage. So limit it. I'll set it to something like 100, maybe 1,000 in production, or I'm sorry, 500. And then I need to point it at the server. So I'm going to hit Enabled, Show, and it needs to look like this. Server equals HTTP, the name of your server. Mine is WECDemo LabMe Inc.internal on 5985. If you're using TLS on top of the encryption already baked in, the port can change. and then /wsman subscription manager. And I'll put this in the notes so you don't have to type this out as well. WEC. The refresh interval here is how often you want it to check back in seconds to see if there's new subscriptions or changes to subscriptions. Here I'm just saying every 2 minutes check in. You could do every 300 seconds, 5 minutes, or set it to whatever you want. I'm just going to leave it at 120 seconds. I'm going to hit OK, OK. And then there's one more thing I need to do under event log service for the security channel. I need to change the access control. Otherwise, I won't get logs from this. So I'm going to hit enabled here. And what a lot of online blogs are going to show you is to use this weird OBAG SYD string, which is a special access control. What you'll find, though, is this tends to work on all your assets except for things like your domain controllers. This NS stands for network service, and what you really want is this alternative string, which does the SID instead of the name. So instead of NS for network service, we're going to use what is actually a network service, SID S-1-5-20. I'm going to hit OK. And now I have my policy. I'm just going to look at it in the settings view here. Network service, event log reader, Windows management set to automatic. We've got event forwarding limited to 100. Looks like it's pointing to WEC demo. And I've got my log access. Technically don't need the user configuration. So if you want, you could disable that side under details. User configuration settings disabled. That's just preference. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go check on this Windows 10 box. You can also check on the WEC demo box itself. So it's still 0 machines checking in. I'm going to log into this Windows 10 box, and I'm just going to do a group policy update. Let me make sure I'm on the domain here. This logon might take a second because I haven't logged into it in a while. There we go. And I'm just going to trigger a GP update to make sure it got the new policy. And then if all things worked, I should have logs on the collector. First time I've logged onto this box, so it's going to take just a second. Let's check in here. Now, depending on how your Active Directory is set up, usually it's between 30 minutes and 90 minutes before all machines will get the change. Again, I'm going to speed this up here just a little bit. All right, so now I'm logged in. I'm going to open a command prompt. Run this as administrator. And I'm going to do a GP update /force. Just going to force it to go check to see if there's any group policy changes. Give that just a second. Usually this is fairly quick. And then once this is done, just to validate that it's seeing the policy, I'm going to do a GP result. And just a /R should be fine. I'm going to scroll up. Under the computer settings, it's showing that it's received the policy. So hopefully now, if I switch back to the demo, I now have a source computer of 1. If I do a runtime status, there it is, Windows 10 WEC test. Policy was applied. It's added to the subscription as an authenticated device. And if I go to forwarded events, there they are. They're from the computer. Ta-da! Now, if you're trying to get these logs onto something else like a SIM, this is where typically you'll drop an agent like a Splunk Universal Forwarder, WinLogBeat, NXLog, whatever it is, WinCollect for QRadar. And since all the systems, I only have one, but usually you'll have many, are going to this forwarded events channel, you can drop multiple agents and ship them off to multiple SIMs now from one spot. And all without deploying agents on your production assets. Like I didn't install anything on this Windows 10 WEC test Windows 10 box. In my production one, the way I've got it set up is it basically goes through anything that's a Windows box, domain controller or otherwise, and it ships all the logs off to my WEC system. I just spun up another one to walk through the install. So it's really not that bad. A group policy, a subscription, and off to the races you go. The other cool thing is now if I go back into the WEC demo, if I edit one of these subscriptions, like maybe you want to add a filter so you're not collecting certain logs, well, you update a subscription, and at the refresh interval, it'll see if there's a change to the subscription, and now all the assets globally update their filters. You want to log a new channel, update this XML section, and all the machines will dynamically get that change. So asset management is really convenient. There is a kicker to this, though. You really should not have more than 4,000 assets per Windows Event Collector. In truth, it really should be more around 3,000. I don't know if I'd go past 3,000. Microsoft's current recommendations as of the time of this recording are between 2,000 and 4,000 per Windows Event Collector. They also go through the sizing of RAM, which I believe is 16 gig of RAM, and a couple cores on there as well. It's not a whole lot of resources, but it can add up. You also have to factor that all these logs count as disk I/O. So if you're doing a whole bunch of systems to like a SATA LUN or NFS share, that might not work. So you do have to have fast enough disk. I'm not saying necessarily SSD, but maybe not SATA. Okay, but there's some more caveats in here. What actually happens when you do this is the machine actually creates a registry key. I'm bringing up a special GitHub project that I have for this. So if I go to my HA Security Solutions repo and I find the WEC Computer Group Management, this has a couple things in here. First one I'm going to talk through. This is more advanced stuff. This is for large organizations. In your home lab, you probably don't need this at all. But if you're a large company and you have tens of thousands of assets and you're constantly adding new ones and decommissioning old ones, there's a few things you need to be aware of that nobody tends to talk about. And it's kind of interesting because you need to be aware of this. What happens is you deploy your Windows Event Collector. Let's say maybe you have 3,000, 4,000 assets checking into it, but you're adding some and removing old ones. And over time, it just seems like the box gets slower and slower to the point where finally it quits working. And a lot of organizations, they just delete the Windows Event Collector and start over, and they don't think anything of it. The reason that's happening is inside the Windows Event Collector server or servers, there's registry keys. I'm going to browse out to this here real quick. I don't always remember this. So current version of Event Collector. Okay, I think I've got it. So I'm going to open regedit. I'm going to expand local machine, software, Microsoft, Windows, current version, Event Collector. Here we go. Expand this over. Subscriptions. I created a test subscription, remember? And under that, there's some settings I can adjust, like read existing event logs. You really don't want to change the registry keys directly, by the way. You want to use the webutil.exe because otherwise you'll find you change the registry key and it's not actually honored yet. Use webutil. And under that subscription, there's an entry for every single computer that has ever checked in. And these registry keys are actually tracking what channels. So look in here, there's a whole bunch of things, PowerShell, there's system and security, and it's showing where it left off. So there's a when did it last check in and what log did it leave off per channel. Now, that makes sense. That's a good thing. But what happens is if you start with, say, 3,000, 4,000 machines, you're near the max, but you're decommissioning systems while adding new systems, the decommissioned systems that are no longer in existence, those still have registry keys in here. And it starts to bloat it up, and the Windows Event Collection Service has to read these. And once you get so many of these keys, it becomes really sluggish or unresponsive. So what we have to do is kind of clean this up. So what the script does that I have here is it runs, you just run this as a scheduled task, this manage WEC registry. And what it will do is it'll grab a list of all the computer accounts you have across all of your domains. So grabs every domain you have under your forest, loops through all of them, grabs all the computers. And if the registry key has a name that doesn't exist in Active Directory, it deletes the registry key. Now, if you have non-domain joined machines using Windows Event Forwarding, you would also have to append them, just add a line to append them arbitrarily to this computers list. That way their registry keys don't get deleted as well. But typically Windows Event Forwarding is just domain joined machines, which means you can just grab the script, run it as a Windows scheduled task once a day, and it will auto purge decommissioned machines for you. Okay. By the way, I accept no legal liability for any damages done with this script. That being said, it's in multiple production environments. It works really well. I've got environments as large as like 50,000 assets that are using this, and it just auto purges things. So one advanced technique is making sure you're clearing the WEC registry. Okay. The other thing that is probably more important, the main goal of this project, is this script called maintain computer groups. What if you have 50,000 assets? Well, 50,000 assets at max you really want. So bringing up 50,000 assets. At max you want, say, 4,000 assets per Windows Event Collector. To be safe, you might want to do something like 3,000 or 3,500. That means in this case, if I go for 3,000, I need 17 Windows Event Collectors. Whew. That also means that I need to try to allocate roughly 3,000 assets per one of those 17. Now I can go in Active Directory and I can be like, oh, okay, let me get back in my system here. Let me go over to the domain controller and, okay, how can I don't have a lot of OUs, but maybe I had a workstation OU and I break it down by department. I have a server OU and I break that down by functionality. And well, there's 3,000 workstations here, but there's 5,000 in this OU. And I could assign OUs by, or group policies to OUs and say this group policy is for WEC server 1, 2, 3, up to 17. But assigning OUs and mapping them that way is really difficult, and it's manual. It's not very accurate either. So a different approach, what I would probably recommend you do, is in Active Directory, you go into Active Directory, Users and Computers, or ADAC, I don't care. And in here, you create a group, one per Windows Event Collector. So if I'll just act like I had multiple. Let's say WEC1. You can name these whatever you want. It doesn't matter. Oops, wrong thing. New one, group, WEC2. Let's say I had 3 Windows Event Collectors, and I'm trying to dynamically allocate assets to these 3 groups. Well, what you would do is create the groups, and then you would put their group names in this top of the script. So I had WEC1, WEC2, WEC3. This should say computer groups WEC1, WEC2, WEC3. Technically, you could let it auto create the groups if they're missing. I would just create them ahead of time just to be safe. Point it at your top level domain that you want to get machines from. And then from there, you run this once a day as a scheduled tasks. What it will do is it'll grab all the computers you have in your domain, and it will dynamically assign them to WEC1, WEC2, WEC3, or WEC1 through 17, because it will evenly distribute computers to each of the groups. Now, from line 15 down to 37, I'm doing some advanced stuff that you absolutely do not need to do. What I'm allowing you to do is, as it goes through every computer account in Active Directory, I'm giving you the opportunity, if you want to, and again, you do not need to do this, to allocate them as workstations or servers, because workstations and servers technically have a different volume of events. So let's say you think servers generate 4 times more events than workstations. So what I'm doing is I'm doing a point-based system to automatically distribute the load. So rather than just saying 3,000 per, I'm kind of shifting them around using this weighted system. You totally do not need to do this. By default, it'll just treat everything as 1 point. But I'm giving you the opportunity to use regex, OU names, or computer names to dynamically allocate. I'm also saying you can hard code what assets you never want to do Windows Event Forwarding for, if for whatever reason you want to do that. So really, for most environments, I would probably say just empty this out, like delete that string, delete these. These are just examples. Just delete those so that they're empty and just let it auto assign everything as 1 point. Unless you want to, and then you can. From there, that's it. You don't modify anything. This will dynamically run once a day, find all new computers that aren't assigned to one of those groups, and it'll allocate them evenly. Then at the subscription level, what you would do, going back to the WEC demo, is instead of adding the computer accounts here, go back into Event Viewer, Subscriptions, where I did select computer groups, I did the computer manually. You would add to the first server WEC 1, to the second server WEC 2, to the third server WEC 3, and now that will automatically grab all the computers that were dynamically assigned to those groups. Thus, you have automatic load balancing. It's not really truly load balancing, but it effectively is for Windows Event Collection. So hopefully you've enjoyed this. I know they're here at the end. I got a little in the weeds. But Windows Event Collection is probably the most common way I see organizations get Windows logs so that they then can drop a third-party agent on the collectors that ships it to their SIM. Why? Because if I have 50,000 agents, rather than deploying 50,000 agents, I deploy 1 agent per collector, which might have been 17, WEC 1 through 17. That's a lot easier to maintain, and I don't have that problem of conflicting agents, performance, and politics, right? So it solves those problems. So hopefully this video is helping you figure out how to do Windows Event Forwarding at scale. Just throwing this out there. Again, if you like these videos, subscribe to the channel. But at this time, I just recently released a new class on a platform called mycyber.training. I'm going to try to have more commercial grade, enterprise grade training classes on this platform. The first one relates to this in that it's data ingestion at scale. It's a class that goes through and walks through how to handle, tens to hundreds of thousands of events per second using a tool called Logstash. So often what I'll have is Windows Event Collection, and then I'll ship the logs from there to something like Logstash, where I can filter it, I can enrich it, I can auto-correlate it to other data sources like Sysmon, EDR, things like that, and I can use this tool to grab logs from popular cloud applications, whether they're SaaS, maybe container as a service, infrastructure service, so on. So this class is tactical data handling, data ingestion at scale. It's related, so check that out as well. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.